There is a pervasive social assumption that economists are simply stingy. The popular image is one of obsessive hoarding, a psychological compulsion to lock away wealth and refuse participation in normal consumer spending. While an outside observer might label this behavior as extreme frugality, the actual mechanic at work is utility maximization. In modern macroeconomics, capital is fiercely scarce. Simultaneously, everyday survival requires constant access to vital utilities, like telecommunications data, that command disproportionately high prices relative to average incomes. We can observe this dynamic by analyzing the data purchasing habits of Yasir Sanusi. When confronted with a chaotic market of telecom data plans, he does not penny pinch. He deploys an advanced economic survival framework. Refusing to overspend is a structural imperative. It is the precise calculation required to extract the maximum possible value from severely limited resources. Rational actors navigate adversarial, chaotic markets using a specific tool: constrained optimization. The raw market data presented to a consumer is often deliberately confusing. Telecommunications providers offer bundles featuring wildly varying data volumes, rapidly expiring durations, and mismatched price points. Making a rational decision in this environment requires abandoning intuition. The raw data must be forced through strict mathematical filters. We will track Yasir's real-time problem-solving as he applies 5 distinct, escalating mathematical constraints to his available market options. Each consecutive stage of this model mathematically eliminates inefficient choices, stripping away the noise until only one optimal, stable reality remains. The analysis begins at the unconstrained baseline. This is the theoretical starting point where an economic actor evaluates a market assuming they have infinite resources to spend. Yasir establishes Phase 1 parameters. At this baseline point, explicit metrics were price and quantity. The assumption was all bundles possessed equal utility timelines. This chart maps out that initial analytical space. We plot quantity in gigabytes across the x-axis against the upfront financial cost in naira on the y-axis. We enter the 4 initial telecommunication bundles into this space as discrete data points. Calculating the marginal cost, dividing price by quantity for each point, reveals that the 112.5 gigabyte plan at 18,000 naira provides the absolute lowest per gigabyte rate. Massive, expensive plans naturally win in a theoretical vacuum because of economies of scale. However, relying entirely on unconstrained metrics in the real world guarantees failure. Telecommunications data is not a permanent asset. Short-duration plans require validity multipliers to account for expiring billing cycles. Yasir corrects the model. Time, t equals 30 days, was bound to the equation. Short-duration plans required validity multipliers to simulate an entire monthly consumption cycle. We update the chart to include a normalized 30-day timeline. The bundles are now evaluated across a standardized monthly consumption window. To keep the 7-day and 14-day plans active for a full month, the user must buy them multiple times. The model compounds these short duration points to reflect the required renewals. Compounding the 14-day 35 gigabyte plan twice changes the output to 70 total gigabytes, entirely disrupting the initial baseline rankings. Standardizing time across the board reveals hidden volume advantages. True economic value cannot be measured until the temporal constraints are strictly equalized. The evaluation must now shift from what is geometrically optimal to what is actually financially possible. Yasir applies his capital limits. An absolute financial threshold was established. I is less than or equal to 15,000 naira. Any single bundle or compounded strategy costing more than 15,000 naira was moved out of the feasible consumption set. This chart now features a strict budget ceiling. This horizontal red line strikes at 15,000 naira, creating an absolute boundary separating theoretical luxury from the feasible market. Any strategy breaching this ceiling is eliminated. The 112.5 gigabyte baseline winner is instantly swallowed by the blackout. Evaluating the surviving options beneath the budget cap shows the compounded 14-day rotation is now the undisputed leader in pure volume. Applying a rigid budget ceiling physically removes theoretical best value options from reality. A rational actor must optimize strictly within their available liquidity. Extreme cost-cutting always creates its own vulnerabilities. A cheap product is mathematically useless if it fails to meet the user's minimum functional needs. Yasir writes, "A strict consumption floor was introduced. UMIN equals 40 gigabytes. Any underlying plan or combination yielding less than 40 gigabytes for the month was structurally disqualified." On the x-axis of this same chart, a vertical line establishes that 40 gigabyte utility floor. This is the absolute functional minimum required to maintain monthly connectivity. Any bundle falling short of this volume goes dark. This successfully eradicates the cheapest standalone plan from the market. The intersection of the 15,000 Nigeria budget ceiling and the 40 gigabyte utility floor traps the data. A vast, chaotic market shrinks into a tiny, highly restricted feasible zone, containing exactly two choices: the compounded 35 gigabyte rotation and a single 54 gigabyte monthly plan. Layering utility floors onto budget ceilings forces a dizzying array of consumer choices into a tightly controlled, binary mathematical decision. Static, perfect information mathematics cannot survive contact with a dynamic, adversarial market. Promotional offers can often vanish without warning. Yasir addresses this algorithmic volatility. Risk factors and information asymmetry regarding dynamic telecom algorithms were written into the model. The 14-day rotation carried market volatility, the risk of disappearing, while the 30-day plan guaranteed certainty. Zooming into the remaining data points on the diagram, we can measure the exact marginal variance between the final two options. Upgrading from the 30-day plan to the 14-day rotation nets an extra 16 gigabytes for 3,000 naira. But the 14-day offer contains an invisible threat. Because it relies on a short-term promotional algorithm, there is a high probability the provider revokes the offer before the second 14-day cycle can be purchased. If the offer vanishes on day 15, it triggers a mathematical chain reaction. The user is forced offline and must buy expensive, standard retail data to survive the rest of the month, instantly shattering the absolute 15,000 naira budget ceiling. This establishes the risk premium. Choosing the slightly smaller 54 gigabyte plan requires sacrificing 16 gigabytes of volume. That missing data is the price paid to guarantee 30 days of absolute safety. Optimal economic decisions actively price in the unknown. A mathematically efficient plan is useless if it carries a fatal probability of financial ruin. The data confirms a single outcome. The 54 gigabyte plan is mathematically optimal because it honors the budget, passes the utility floor, and entirely neutralizes volatility. The chart clears, leaving only the singular choice that survived the rigors of the model. The messy concept of hoarding is replaced by the stable architecture of optimized constraint. This methodology proves that applied economics imposes predictable order onto deliberately confusing, adversarial markets. Refusing unconstrained assumptions, setting hard limits, and mathematically defining risks is the only valid way to guarantee structural survival. True rationality is not about blindly hoarding the most currency. It is about engineering the highest guaranteed utility within the absolute, unforgiving limits of reality.